I sit quietly in the mahogany-paneled boardroom of Thompson Family Holdings, taking notes while my sister Jessica presents her ambitious expansion plan. When she dismisses my previous contributions as little side jobs, and Dad nods approvingly about leaving business to professionals, I feel the familiar sting of being underestimated. What they don't know is that my side jobs generated the $95 million secretly funding Jessica's entire expansion through shell companies. As Jessica continues her presentation, I quietly text my investment director 4 simple words that will change everything. The morning started like any other Tuesday at Thompson Family Holdings, except today would determine the future of our family business. I arrived at 7:30 an hour before everyone else, which had become my routine over the past 5 years. The building still carried the smell of fresh coffee and cleaning supplies, a stark contrast to the chaos that would soon unfold. Thompson Family Holdings began 30 years ago when Dad transformed his small construction company into what is now a $15 million operation. Back then, it was just Robert Thompson and 3 guys with pickup trucks taking on residential projects around our hometown of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Mom used to joke that Dad built their marriage one house at a time since he proposed to her on the foundation of the first home he ever constructed. Jessica, 3 years my senior, had always been the golden child. Harvard Business School summa cum laude, with internships at McKinsey and Goldman Sachs decorating her resume like medals on a war hero's chest. When she returned home 5 years ago to modernize operations, Dad practically handed her the keys to the kingdom. Her official title read Senior Vice President of Strategic Development, while mine simply stated Operations Coordinator, which everyone understood meant glorified assistant. The boardroom gradually filled with familiar faces. Dad entered first, his silver hair perfectly combed and his navy suit pressed to perfection. At 62, Robert Thompson still commanded respect, though I noticed how he deferred more frequently to Jessica's opinions these days. The 3 external board members followed Harold Mills, our accountant, for 20 years. Sarah Chen, a local business attorney, and David Rodriguez, who owned the largest hardware supply company in the county. Patricia Walsh, our chief financial officer, settled into her usual spot with thick folders containing the morning's agenda. Patricia had joined us 2 years ago after working at Deere & Company's corporate headquarters, bringing big company experience to our growing operation. She possessed an analytical mind that could spot financial irregularities from a mile away, which made my secret activities particularly challenging to conceal. Jessica swept into the room at exactly 9 o'clock, her burgundy blazer and matching skirt conveying the authority she craved. Her presentation materials were arranged with military precision-bound copies of Project Horizon for each board member, a laptop connected to the projection screen, and her signature gold pen that she claimed brought her luck during important negotiations. "Now, good morning, everyone," Jessica began, her voice carrying the confident tone she had perfected during her consulting days. "Today marks a pivotal moment for Thompson Family Holdings. Project Horizon represents our transition from regional player to major market force in commercial real estate development." I opened my notebook and began taking notes, a habit that had earned me countless eye rolls from Jessica over the years. She viewed my meticulous record-keeping as evidence of my limited intellectual capacity, never suspecting that my notes contained details about million-dollar property transactions and investment strategies. Our expansion plan targets the growing commercial corridor between Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. Jessica continued, clicking to the first slide of her presentation. Market analysis indicates a 40% growth opportunity over the next 18 months, with projected revenues exceeding $30 million annually once fully operational. Harold Mills leaned forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "The numbers look impressive, Jessica. But what about the capital requirements? This seems like a significant financial commitment." "Excellent question, Harold," Jessica replied, her smile radiating confidence. "Project Horizon requires a total investment of $95 million over 18 months. Patricia will break down the funding structure momentarily." I continued writing, though my notes had shifted to calculating the irony of the situation. Every dollar Jessica was discussing had originated from my investment portfolio, channeled through carefully constructed shell companies that even Patricia's keen eye hadn't penetrated. My college roommate Marcus, now a director at Goldman Sachs, had helped establish the funding mechanisms that would allow my family's business to expand while keeping my involvement completely invisible. Patricia stood and distributed financial summaries to each board member. The funding breakdown includes $30 million from our existing credit facilities, $20 million from equipment financing, and $45 million from a private investor consortium that approached us 6 months ago. Private investor consortium. Sarah Chen inquired, her legal instincts immediately engaging. Can you provide more details about this group, Simai? The consortium operates through Thompson Investment Group, a holding company specializing in Midwest commercial development, Patricia explained. Their due diligence was thorough, and their terms are extremely favorable. The partnership agreement includes minimal oversight requirements and flexible repayment schedules. Dad nodded approvingly, clearly impressed by Jessica's ability to secure such advantageous financing. Jessica, you've outdone yourself. When I started this company, I never imagined we'd be discussing projects of this magnitude. Thank you, Dad, Jessica replied, her voice carrying genuine warmth for perhaps the first time that morning. However, I want to emphasize that this expansion requires complete focus from our leadership team. We're entering a different league now, competing with established developers who won't hesitate to exploit any weaknesses. She paused dramatically, her gaze sweeping across the room before landing on me. Which brings me to an important point about operational efficiency. Ricky has been invaluable in handling administrative tasks, but Project Horizon demands expertise that frankly exceeds his current skill set. The familiar knot formed in my stomach as Jessica prepared to deliver another public humiliation. Her voice took on the condescending tone I had endured countless times before. Ricky's contributions have been limited to filing, scheduling, and coffee runs. These are important functions, but we need to be realistic about capabilities when $95 million are at stake. I suggest we stick to what everyone does best. Ricky can continue with his little side jobs while we handle the real business decisions. Dad nodded in agreement, his expression showing no recognition of how deeply those words cut. Your sister's right, son. This level of strategic planning requires specific education and experience. Leave the business decisions to the professionals. Harold Mills shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly sensing the tension but unwilling to intervene in family dynamics. Sarah Chen studied her legal pad intently, while David Rodriguez focused on the financial projections with exaggerated concentration. Patricia Walsh observed the interaction with her characteristic analytical detachment, though I caught a flicker of something in her eyes that might have been sympathy. I continued taking notes, my pen moving steadily across the page while my mind raced through calculations. $95 million. Every penny of it mine. Funneled through investment vehicles that had taken 3 years to establish, all in service of supporting a family business that had never acknowledged my contributions. The irony was suffocating. While Jessica dismissed my little side jobs, those activities had generated over $200 million in portfolio value. My algorithm for identifying undervalued commercial properties had outperformed market averages by 18% annually. The construction company she was so proud to modernize had unknowingly subcontracted work on 12 properties I owned across 3 states. Ricky, Jessica's sharp tone snapped me back to the present. I asked if you understood your role moving forward. Yes, I replied quietly, closing my notebook. I understand completely. During the coffee break, I stepped outside to clear my head when I overheard Jessica's phone conversation through the conference room's thin walls. She was speaking to her boyfriend Trevor, a marketing executive she had met at a business networking event. No, babe, you don't understand how perfect this is, Jessica was saying, her voice animated with excitement. Once Project Horizon succeeds, Dad will finally see that I'm the only one capable of running this company. Ricky's just dead weight we've been carrying out of family obligation. My blood ran cold as she continued. I've been telling potential partners that he's mentally slow just to manage expectations. It's actually been helpful because no one expects anything from him, so they focus entirely on my presentations. Once this expansion is complete, I'll restructure operations and his position will become redundant. Dad's already warming up to the idea. She laughed, the sound sharp and calculating. Trevor, I'm not being cruel. I'm being practical. Some people are meant to lead and others are meant to follow. Ricky's much happier when he's not pressured to think beyond his abilities. The conversation continued, but I had heard enough. Jessica wasn't just dismissing my contributions. She was actively sabotaging my reputation to advance her own career. Every success she achieved would cement my family's perception of me as incompetent, creating a permanent barrier to recognition or respect. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Marcus's contact information. My finger hovered over the call button as I considered the consequences of what I was about to do. 3 years of careful planning, $95 million in funding, and my family's entire future hung in the balance. The conference room door opened and Jessica emerged with her characteristic, confident stride. She glanced at me dismissively before returning to the boardroom, her heels clicking against the polished floor with military precision. I typed a simple message. Marcus, execute withdrawal protocol. All 95 from Horizon funding. Immediate. His response came within seconds. Are you certain this will trigger immediate contract reviews? Execute now, I replied, then slipped my phone back into my pocket. Through the conference room windows, I watched Jessica resume her presentation with renewed enthusiasm, completely unaware that her entire expansion plan was about to collapse. Dad listened attentively, nodding at strategic points while the board members reviewed their financial summaries with growing interest. Within minutes, Jessica's phone began buzzing insistently. She glanced at it with annoyance, then again with concern as the calls continued. Her confident demeanor flickered momentarily before she excused herself to take an urgent call. I returned to my seat and opened my notebook, prepared to document the beginning of the end for Jessica's empire built on my invisible foundation. The seeds of my secret empire were planted during my junior year at Iowa State University, where I was pursuing a computer science degree while Jessica earned her MBA at Harvard. Most evenings found me in the engineering library, working on an algorithm that could analyze commercial property values by correlating dozens of variables, zoning changes, traffic patterns, demographic shifts, and municipal development plans. My roommate Marcus had initially been skeptical when I explained my theory about systematic undervaluation in secondary commercial markets. Ricky, every hedge fund in America has teams working on real estate algorithms, he had said while reviewing my code. What makes you think a college student can outsmart professional analysts? The answer came 6 months later when my algorithm correctly predicted the surge in property values along the Interstate 80 corridor. While established firms focused on major metropolitan areas, I had identified a pattern in smaller cities where population growth preceded commercial development by an average of 14 months. The window was narrow, but the profit margins were substantial for investors willing to act quickly. Marcus graduated with a finance degree and immediately joined Goldman Sachs as an analyst in their real estate division. Our partnership began informally with Marcus feeding me market intelligence, while I provided analytical insights that enhanced his professional reputation. Within 2 years, we had formalized our collaboration through Thompson Investment Group, a limited liability company that allowed us to pool resources and leverage institutional financing. The irony of the name was intentional. Using my family's surname provided psychological satisfaction while maintaining complete operational secrecy. Legal documents listed Marcus as managing director, while I remained the anonymous beneficial owner through a series of trust arrangements that would have impressed the most sophisticated tax attorneys. Our first major acquisition was a defunct shopping center in Waterloo that my algorithm had flagged as prime for redevelopment. The property had been empty for 3 years, with previous owners unable to secure financing for renovation. We purchased it for $2.8 million, invested another $1.5 million in improvements, and sold it 18 months later for $7.2 million. The success pattern repeated across Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin. While my family assumed I was handling filing and scheduling at Thomson Holdings, I was actually managing a portfolio that had grown to exceed $200 million in total value. My daily coffee runs were site visits to properties under consideration for acquisition. Phone calls Jessica dismissed as personal conversations were actually negotiations with contractors, architects, and municipal planning officials. The sophistication of our operations had evolved considerably since those early days. Thomson Investment Group now employed 14 people across 3 offices, including construction managers, property analysts, and legal specialists. Our projects ranged from small commercial renovations to major mixed-use developments that competed directly with established regional developers. Patricia Walsh's arrival as Chief Financial Officer had created my biggest operational challenge. Her experience at Deere & Company included oversight of subsidiary investments and partnership structures, giving her the expertise to recognize patterns that might expose my activities. I had been forced to implement additional layers of legal separation between Thomson Investment Group and Thomson Holdings. Though Patricia's persistent questions suggested she was beginning to suspect unusual connections, the most bitter aspect of my secret success was discovering how extensively Thomson Holdings had unknowingly benefited from my investments. Our family construction company had subcontracted work on 12 projects I owned, earning approximately $4.7 million in fees over 3 years. Dad regularly praised Jessica for bringing in new business when those contracts originated from my strategic planning. Last winter, I had faced the most difficult decision of my professional life when Jessica's expansion planning began encountering financing obstacles. Traditional lenders were reluctant to provide sufficient capital for Project Horizon, viewing Thomson Holdings as too small for such ambitious development. Jessica's frustration had been evident during family dinners, where she complained about narrow-minded bankers who couldn't appreciate her vision. My solution had seemed elegant at the time. Through Marcus's connections, I had approached Thomson Holdings as Thomson Investment Group, offering to provide the necessary funding through a partnership agreement. The terms were deliberately favorable to encourage acceptance while maintaining my anonymity. Patricia had conducted thorough due diligence, but our legal structure was designed to withstand professional scrutiny. The arrangement allowed Jessica to present Project Horizon with complete confidence, supported by $95 million that she believed represented validation from sophisticated external investors. Her presentations to the board had emphasized the consortium's selective criteria and competitive evaluation process, never suspecting that the sophisticated investors were her own brother operating through carefully constructed corporate entities. Now, as I watched Jessica field increasingly urgent phone calls during her boardroom presentation, I reflected on the fundamental miscalculation that had led to this moment. I had believed that success would eventually reveal itself, that my contributions would be recognized and appreciated. Instead, Jessica had interpreted the funding success as confirmation of her superior business acumen, using it to further marginalize my role in family operations. Marcus had warned me about this possibility during our planning discussions. "Ricky, you're essentially subsidizing your own humiliation," he had said during one of our quarterly strategy meetings. "Your family will never appreciate contributions they don't know exist. You're creating a situation where Jessica gets credit for your work while you get treated like an incompetent assistant." His words had proven prophetic. Jessica's confidence had grown with each milestone of expansion planning, and her treatment of me had become correspondingly more dismissive. The funding success had emboldened her to speak openly about restructuring my role, viewing Project Horizon as her ticket to complete control of family business operations. The phone conversation I had overheard crystallized everything. Jessica wasn't just underestimating my capabilities. She was actively sabotaging my reputation to advance her career. Her description of me as mentally slow to business partners represented a calculated strategy to eliminate any future challenge to her authority. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Withdrawal initiated. All consortium accounts frozen pending review. Legal implications substantial for Thomson Holdings." I typed back, "Understood. Proceed with full protocol." Through the conference room windows, I could see Jessica's presentation faltering as she tried to manage the crisis erupting on her phone. Patricia Walsh had noticed the disturbance and was reviewing her financial documents with increased intensity. Dad's expression showed growing concern as Jessica stepped out for the fourth time in 15 minutes. The $95 million that had been funding Project Horizon represented approximately 40% of my total investment portfolio, but its withdrawal would trigger consequences far beyond the immediate financial impact. Thompson Holdings had already committed $38 million based on the assured funding signing contracts for equipment purchases and construction deposits that would become immediate liabilities without alternative financing. Marcus's final message arrived as Jessica returned to the boardroom with obvious distress. Emergency board meeting recommended within 48 hours. Thompson Holdings facing potential insolvency without replacement funding. I closed my notebook and prepared to watch my family's empire crumble under the weight of its own arrogance. The emergency alerts began precisely 27 minutes after I sent the withdrawal message to Marcus. Jessica's phone had been buzzing intermittently during her presentation, but the frequency increased dramatically as our carefully constructed funding web began unraveling in real time. Her confident demeanor cracked visibly as she excused herself for the fifth consecutive phone call, leaving the boardroom in awkward silence. "Perhaps we should take a short recess," Dad suggested, his voice betraying the first hints of concern. Patricia Walsh immediately began reviewing her financial documents with the intensity of someone sensing approaching disaster, while the board members exchanged uncomfortable glances that spoke volumes about their growing unease. I remained seated, continuing to take notes with the same methodical precision I had maintained throughout the morning. My notebook now contained detailed observations about each board member's reaction to the developing crisis information that would prove valuable during the reconstruction phase I was already beginning to plan. Marcus's text updates provided real-time intelligence about the cascade of consequences my withdrawal had triggered. Primary contractor requesting immediate funding verification. Bank demanding emergency meeting about loan collateral. Investment Review Board activating due diligence protocols. The complexity of our funding structure had been designed specifically to create this type of systematic collapse. Thompson Investment Group operated through 7 subsidiary entities across 3 states each, with separate banking relationships and legal obligations. When I activated the withdrawal protocol, every connected financial institution received simultaneous notifications of material changes to investment partnerships. Jessica burst back into the boardroom, her professional composure completely abandoned. Her hands trembled slightly as she attempted to organize her presentation materials, while her eyes darted frantically between her phone and the board members' increasingly skeptical expressions. "I apologize for the interruptions," she began, her voice lacking its earlier confidence. "We're experiencing some minor technical difficulties with our funding partners, but nothing that affects the fundamental strength of Project Horizon." Patricia Walsh looked up from her documents with the sharp focus of a financial professional detecting serious irregularities. "Jessica, I just received notification from our primary bank that the consortium funding is under immediate review. They're requesting verification of all source documents within 24 hours. The blood drained from Jessica's face as the full scope of the crisis began registering. Her mouth opened and closed wordlessly as she processed the implications of losing $95 million in committed funding, while having already spent $38 million on equipment and deposits. Harold Mills removed his glasses and cleaned them nervously, a gesture I had observed during every financial crisis in the company's history. "Jessica, how significant are these technical difficulties? Should we be concerned about timeline impacts?" "No, absolutely not," Jessica replied too quickly, her voice rising with barely controlled panic. "This is just routine investment review procedures. These institutional investors are extremely thorough, which is actually a positive indicator of their commitment to long-term partnership success." Sarah Chen's legal training kicked in immediately. "Jessica, if there are material changes to funding arrangements, we have disclosure obligations under our existing contracts. I need to understand the specific nature of these difficulties." My phone vibrated with another update from Marcus, Thompson Holdings credit lines being reevaluated by all major lenders. Equipment financing agreements triggered review clauses. Estimated exposure 38 million, immediate 67 million contingent. I forwarded the message to myself using a different phone number, then raised my hand tentatively. Jessica. I hate to interrupt, but I just received a strange text message about Thompson Holdings financing. Should I be concerned? Jessica's eyes widened with genuine terror as she realized the scope of information spreading through financial networks. What message? Who sent it? Someone from Iowa Community Credit Union, I replied, reading from my phone with practiced innocence. They're asking about verification of partnership agreements for Project Horizon. I don't really understand what it means. Patricia Walsh's complexion went ashen as she recognized the implications. That's our secondary construction lender. If they're requesting verification, it means automated risk management systems have flagged our account for emergency review. Dad stood up abruptly, his authoritative demeanor shifting to barely contained alarm. Jessica, I need straight answers immediately. How serious is this situation? The next 30 minutes became a masterclass in watching carefully constructed lies collapse under the weight of external reality. Jessica attempted to maintain her story about routine investor procedures while fielding increasingly frantic phone calls from contractors, suppliers, and financial institutions. Each conversation left her more visibly shaken as the true magnitude of our funding withdrawal became apparent. Marcus sent another strategic update. Local Business Journal received tip about Thompson Holdings' financial difficulties. Competitors beginning informal inquiries about contract availability. Recommend immediate damage control measures. I shared this information with the appropriate mixture of concern and confusion, watching Patricia Walsh begin calculating worst-case scenarios on her laptop, while Dad paced behind his chair like a caged animal, sensing approaching danger. The board members had progressed from uncomfortable to genuinely alarmed, as they realized their fiduciary responsibilities might be compromised by circumstances beyond their understanding. Masixa. David Rodriguez spoke for the first time since the crisis began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived multiple economic downturns. I've been in business for 35 years and I recognize financial panic when I see it. We need complete transparency about funding status right now. Jessica's final attempt at damage control lasted approximately 90 seconds before collapsing entirely. Her voice broke as she admitted that the consortium funding had been temporarily suspended pending routine verification procedures, while frantically trying to minimize the implications for Project Horizon's timeline and viability. Patricia Walsh closed her laptop with the decisive gesture of someone preparing for financial warfare. Emergency board meeting tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. I need tonight to conduct a complete financial audit and assess our immediate liabilities. Jessica, I'll require access to all consortium documentation and communications. The boardroom emptied quickly as members scattered to manage their individual concerns about association with potential financial scandal. Dad remained behind with Jessica, his face showing the strain of watching 30 years of careful business, building threatened by circumstances he couldn't control or understand. I gathered my notebooks and prepared to leave, pausing at the door to deliver my final strategic move. Dad, if there's anything I can do to help during this difficult time, please let me know. Maybe I could reach out to some of my college contacts who work in finance. For the first time in years, Dad looked at me with something approaching respect rather than dismissive tolerance. That would be helpful, son. We need all the assistance we can get. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone and sent Marcus a simple message. Phase 1 complete. Initialize Phase 2 protocols immediately. His response arrived before I reached the parking lot. Thompson Investment Group prepared to begin rescue negotiations. Estimated timeline for family capitulation 72 hours maximum. The transformation had begun exactly as planned, though watching my family's genuine distress triggered unexpected emotional complexity. Revenge felt less satisfying when accompanied by the sight of Dad's slumped shoulders and Jessica's devastated expression. But the lesson needed to be complete before forgiveness could become possible. The next 72 hours transformed Thompson Holdings from a confident expansion mode company into a desperate operation fighting for survival. By Thursday morning, the crisis had escalated beyond financial difficulties into a full-scale reputation emergency that threatened 30 years of carefully built business relationships. Jessica hadn't slept since Tuesday's boardroom disaster, as evidenced by the dark circles under her eyes and the tremor in her hands when she attempted to drink coffee during our emergency family meeting. Her normally immaculate appearance had deteriorated into wrinkled clothing and disheveled hair that spoke volumes about the psychological pressure she was experiencing. "I don't understand what happened," she repeated for the dozenth time, her voice hollow with exhaustion. The consortium's due diligence was flawless. Their legal documentation was professionally prepared. Their financial references checked out completely through independent verification. Dad sat across from her at the kitchen table in his house, the same place where we had celebrated business successes for decades. Now the familiar surroundings felt oppressive as he struggled to comprehend how quickly their empire was crumbling. His silver hair appeared more gray than usual, and his confident posture had been replaced by the slumped shoulders of a man watching his life's work disintegrate. "Jessica, blame assignments can wait," he said, his voice carrying the weight of approaching financial disaster. "We need solutions immediately. Patricia's analysis shows we have perhaps 1 week before creditors begin demanding immediate payment on obligations we can't meet." The numbers were even worse than I had anticipated. Thompson Holdings had committed $43 million based on assured consortium funding, including equipment purchases, construction deposits, and contractual obligations that would trigger penalty clauses if canceled. Without replacement financing, the company faced potential bankruptcy within 10 business days. Maybe I could help somehow, I offered quietly, playing my role with practiced humility. "I know it's not much, but I could reach out to some of my college contacts who work in finance. Maybe they know about alternative funding sources." Jessica's response revealed the depth of her desperation. For the first time in memory, she looked at me without condescension or dismissiveness. "Ricky, at this point we need to explore every possible option. If you have any connections at all, please contact them immediately." Marcus had been busy implementing phase 2 of our strategy, while the family panicked about impending financial collapse. Thompson Investment Group had quietly approached 3 other regional companies facing similar funding challenges, establishing our reputation as a sophisticated investor group willing to provide emergency financing for strategically valuable partnerships. The private investigator Jessica hired had produced a preliminary report that contained enough accurate information to be credible while missing the crucial details that would expose my involvement. The investigator had traced the consortium funding to Thompson Investment Group but failed to penetrate the legal structures that concealed my ownership. Their working theory focused on industrial espionage by business competitors who had targeted our expansion plans for systematic sabotage. "The timing is too precise to be coincidental," the investigator explained during his briefing at Dad's house. "Someone with detailed inside knowledge orchestrated this funding withdrawal to maximize damage to your expansion timeline. The question is whether this represents competitive interference or personal vendetta." Patricia Walsh had reached similar conclusions through her financial analysis. The withdrawal protocols were activated simultaneously across multiple institutions using sophisticated legal mechanisms that suggest professional expertise. This wasn't random market volatility or routine investor caution. I listened to their theories with appropriate concern, while secretly admiring the thoroughness of Marcus's legal groundwork. Our shell company structure had been designed specifically to withstand professional investigation while maintaining operational effectiveness. Even sophisticated forensic accounting would require months to penetrate the layers of separation between Thompson Investment Group and my personal involvement. The investigation into my background had produced amusing results that reinforced my family's preconceptions about my limited capabilities. The investigator's report described me as a quiet, detail-oriented individual with modest educational achievement and no apparent business connections beyond basic family company responsibilities. They had completely missed my Iowa State computer science degree, my partnership with Marcus, and the extensive professional network I had cultivated through years of property investment. Ricky doesn't have the knowledge or connections necessary for this type of sophisticated financial manipulation, the investigator concluded. His involvement would require expertise in corporate law, international finance, and institutional investment procedures that significantly exceed his demonstrated capabilities. Jessica nodded approvingly at this assessment, apparently finding comfort in confirmation of her long-held beliefs about my intellectual limitations. Dad showed no reaction, his attention focused entirely on survival strategies rather than blame assignment. By Friday morning, the crisis had attracted unwanted public attention as local competitors began circling the wounded company like predators sensing opportunity. 3 major contractors had contacted Patricia about acquiring Thompson Holdings' existing projects at distressed prices, while equipment suppliers demanded immediate payment for pending orders to avoid automatic cancellation. The Cedar Rapids Business Journal had picked up the story through their network of financial sources, preparing an article about Thompson Holdings' expansion difficulties that would appear in next week's edition, unless the crisis was resolved immediately. Jessica spent most of Friday attempting to convince the reporter that the funding issues represented temporary administrative delays rather than fundamental business problems. "I can arrange a meeting with Thompson Investment Group," I announced during Friday evening's family crisis session, delivering the words with carefully practiced uncertainty. "My roommate Marcus works at Goldman Sachs now, and he mentioned that his company sometimes partners with Midwest investment groups. Maybe he could facilitate an introduction." Dad's reaction was immediate and desperate. "Ricky, if you can arrange that meeting, I'll personally guarantee you a 20% ownership stake in Thompson Holdings. We need sophisticated investors who understand our market position and growth potential." Jessica's expression showed internal conflict between her natural inclination to dismiss my contributions and her recognition that conventional solutions had failed completely. "Are you certain your friend can arrange this? We can't afford false hope at this point." "I'll call him tonight," I promised already, knowing that Marcus was prepared to begin rescue negotiations the moment I gave the signal. Thompson Investment Group might be willing to consider emergency partnership arrangements if we can demonstrate long-term viability and competent management. The irony was intoxicating. My family was preparing to negotiate rescue terms with the same investment group that had created their crisis, completely unaware that they would be begging for mercy from the brother they had spent years dismissing as intellectually inadequate. Saturday morning brought the final piece of leverage I needed to complete the transformation. Trevor, Jessica's boyfriend, called with devastating news that shattered her remaining emotional reserves. The marketing executive who had professed deep commitment to their relationship was ending their association, immediately citing concerns about potential scandal affecting his professional reputation. "I can't risk being connected to financial instability," Trevor explained during their brief phone conversation, which Jessica had placed on speaker without realizing I was within hearing range. "My clients expect partners who represent success and stability, not crisis management and potential bankruptcy." Jessica's breakdown was complete and heartbreaking. The confident Harvard MBA who had dominated family business discussions for 5 years dissolved into sobbing acknowledgement that her expansion dreams had become a nightmare, threatening everyone she cared about. Dad held her while she cried, his own eyes showing the strain of watching his daughter's professional confidence collapse along with their financial security. "I'll call Marcus right now," I said quietly, reaching for my phone with the gravity appropriate for our family's darkest hour. "If Thompson Investment Group can help us, we need to move quickly before this situation becomes irreversible." As I dialed Marcus's number, I felt the bitter satisfaction of justice beginning to balance the scales of years of humiliation and dismissal. The meeting with Thompson Investment Group was scheduled for Monday morning at the Drake Hotel in downtown Des Moines, 90 miles from Cedar Rapids, and far enough from home to feel appropriately sophisticated for such high-stakes negotiations. I had suggested the location as offering neutral territory, where serious investors would feel comfortable discussing major financial commitments, while secretly appreciating the psychological advantage of placing my family in unfamiliar surroundings. Marcus arrived Sunday evening to prepare for his performance as the lead investment representative of Thompson Investment Group. We met at a coffee shop near the Iowa State campus where our friendship had begun 8 years earlier, to review final strategy details and confirm our coordinated approach to the family rescue operation. "Are you certain about putting them through this level of psychological pressure?" Marcus asked as we reviewed his prepared talking points. "Your father looked genuinely broken during the preliminary phone conversation yesterday. They need to understand consequences before they can appreciate solutions," I replied, though his question triggered uncomfortable memories of Dad's defeated expression during Friday's family meeting. 5 years of dismissive treatment and public humiliation don't get erased by one business crisis. The lesson has to be complete. Marcus had prepared an impressive performance package for Monday's presentation. His business cards identified him as Senior Director of Midwest Investment Partnerships, while his supporting documentation included financial references that would satisfy even Patricia Walsh's analytical scrutiny. Thompson Investment Group's portfolio summary showcased successful projects across 3 states without revealing my personal involvement in their management. The psychological preparation required for Monday morning felt similar to preparing for a major theatrical performance. I selected clothing that conveyed appropriate respect for the meeting's significance, while maintaining my established persona as Jessica's less sophisticated younger brother. My notebook contained detailed questions that Marcus and I had rehearsed, designed to demonstrate genuine interest in business strategy without revealing my actual expertise. Jessica spent Sunday evening preparing presentation materials that showcased Thompson Holdings' potential and track record, while minimizing discussion of current financial difficulties. Her desperation was evident in the meticulous attention she devoted to every chart and graph, treating this meeting as her final opportunity to salvage both family business and personal reputation. Monday morning arrived with unseasonably cold weather that seemed to mirror the emotional climate surrounding our family's crisis. We gathered at Dad's house at 6:30 to review final preparations before driving to Des Moines, together a symbolic gesture that emphasized family unity during our most challenging period. "Ricky, I want you to take detailed notes during this meeting," Dad instructed as we loaded into his car. "These investors will be evaluating our entire organization, not just financial projections. Your observations about their concerns and priorities could be crucial for follow-up discussions." Jessica nodded in agreement, her attitude toward me transformed by desperate circumstances. "Your friend Marcus has been incredibly helpful in arranging this meeting. If Thompson Investment Group agrees to partnership terms, you'll deserve significant credit for saving our expansion plans." The 40-minute drive to Des Moines provided opportunity for final psychological preparation. Jessica reviewed her presentation notes obsessively, while Dad practiced answers to anticipated questions about operational efficiency and market positioning. I maintained my established role as supportive but intellectually limited family member, asking occasional questions that reinforced their expectations about my capabilities. Marcus was waiting in the hotel lobby when we arrived, his appearance perfectly calibrated to convey sophisticated professionalism without intimidating potential partners. His charcoal gray suit, crisp white shirt, and conservative silk tie communicated serious business intentions, while his warm handshake and genuine smile put everyone immediately at ease. "Thank you for arranging this meeting on such short notice," Dad said as we walked toward the private conference room Marcus had reserved. "Ricky speaks very highly of your expertise and judgment." Ricky's insights about Midwest commercial development have been extremely valuable, Marcus replied, delivering the line with practiced sincerity. His understanding of regional market dynamics exceeds most professional analysts I work with. Jessica shot me a surprised glance, clearly puzzled by Marcus's assessment of capabilities she had never recognized. Dad looked pleased, but not particularly shocked, apparently interpreting Marcus's comment as polite acknowledgement of my modest contributions rather than recognition of substantial expertise. The conference room was arranged to maximize psychological impact on my family while providing Marcus optimal positioning for his performance. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Des Moines' financial district, while the mahogany table and leather chairs conveyed the gravitas appropriate for $95 million negotiations. Marcus began with a masterful presentation about Thompson Investment Group's philosophy and track record, emphasizing their selective criteria for partnership opportunities and commitment to long-term value creation, rather than short-term profit maximization. His documentation included case studies of successful partnerships with family-owned companies facing similar expansion challenges. Our preliminary analysis suggests Thompson Holdings possesses exactly the characteristics we seek in strategic partners, Marcus explained as Jessica hung on every word. Strong regional reputation, experienced leadership, and demonstrated competence in project execution. However, we require complete operational transparency and restructured decision-making processes to ensure partnership success. The negotiations continued for 2 hours, with Marcus skillfully extracting commitments for enhanced oversight and accountability, while Jessica agreed to any terms that would restore project financing. Dad's relief was obvious as Marcus outlined partnership conditions that seemed both reasonable and achievable. Thompson Investment Group is prepared to provide $120 million in total financing, Marcus announced as we reached the agreement's climactic moment. This includes the original $95 million for Project Horizon, plus an additional $25 million for operational enhancement and contingency reserves. Jessica's emotional response was immediate and overwhelming. Tears of relief streamed down her face as she realized that her expansion dreams were not only salvaged, but actually enhanced beyond original projections. Dad's expression showed similar emotional release, though his businessman's instincts remained engaged throughout the negotiation details. Our partnership agreement requires appointment of a local liaison with complete access to operational decisions and veto authority over major strategic commitments. Marcus continued delivering the crucial condition that would transform family business dynamics. This individual must possess demonstrated analytical capabilities and unquestioned commitment to Thompson Holdings' long-term success. Absolutely, Jessica agreed immediately. We're completely committed to transparency and collaborative decision-making. Marcus smiled with apparent satisfaction. Excellent. Based on our preliminary discussions and Ricky's recommendation, Thompson Investment Group would like to appoint Ricky Thompson as our operational oversight coordinator, with compensation commensurate with the position's strategic importance. The silence that followed this announcement lasted nearly 30 seconds, as Jessica and Dad processed the implications of Marcus's statement. Their expressions showed confusion, surprise, and growing recognition that their assumptions about my capabilities had been fundamentally incorrect. "I'm sorry," Jessica stammered. "Did you say Ricky would be the oversight coordinator?" Thompson Investment Group's due diligence identified Ricky as possessing exactly the analytical skills and institutional knowledge necessary for effective partnership coordination. Marcus explained with professional confidence. His insights during our preliminary discussions demonstrated sophisticated understanding of commercial development and strategic planning that frankly exceeded our expectations for this market sector. Dad looked at me with genuine bewilderment, clearly struggling to reconcile Marcus's assessment with 5 years of treating me as intellectually limited. Jessica's expression showed similar confusion, mixed with growing suspicion that important information had been withheld from her understanding. "Ricky never mentioned having business discussions with your organization," she said slowly, her analytical mind beginning to detect inconsistencies in the narrative she had been accepting. Marcus delivered his response with perfect timing and intonation. "Professional discretion is essential in our industry. Premature disclosure of partnership negotiations can destabilize financial markets and compromise competitive positioning. Ricky demonstrated exceptional judgment in maintaining confidentiality until agreement terms were finalized." The conference room atmosphere had shifted dramatically from relief to confusion as my family struggled to reconcile their preconceptions with rapidly changing evidence about my actual capabilities and involvement in their rescue. Patricia Walsh would complete the puzzle pieces within hours, but for this moment they were forced to confront the possibility that their fundamental assumptions about me had been completely wrong. I maintained my established persona of quiet competence, while internally savoring the beginning of my family's education about overlooking people they considered intellectually inferior. Patricia Walsh's phone call came at 6:15 Tuesday morning, waking Dad from the first peaceful sleep he had enjoyed since the previous Tuesday's funding crisis. Her voice carried the sharp intensity of someone who had spent the entire night conducting forensic analysis of financial records and legal documents. "Robert, we need an emergency family meeting immediately," Patricia announced without preliminary pleasantries. "I've discovered information about Thompson Investment Group that requires immediate discussion before any partnership agreements are finalized." Within 90 minutes, our entire family was assembled in Dad's living room, along with Patricia, whose laptop and boxes of financial documents transformed the familiar space into an impromptu investigative headquarters. Jessica looked apprehensive but hopeful, apparently assuming that Patricia had discovered favorable information that would enhance their rescue negotiations. "Before I present my findings," Patricia began, her tone carrying the gravity of someone delivering life-changing information, "I want everyone to understand that what I'm about to reveal will fundamentally alter our understanding of recent events and family business dynamics." She opened her laptop and activated a presentation that had clearly been prepared with meticulous attention to detail and dramatic impact. The first slide displayed a timeline comparing Thompson Investment Group's corporate formation with significant dates in my personal and educational history. Thompson Investment Group was incorporated in Delaware on June 15, 2019. Patricia announced exactly 3 days after Ricky Thompson graduated from Iowa State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science summa cum laude. Jessica's face went pale as she processed this first piece of contradictory evidence. Computer Science. Ricky studied business administration at community college. "No, Jessica," Patricia continued relentlessly. "Ricky graduated from Iowa State with a 4.0 grade average, completing advanced coursework in algorithm statistical analysis and database management. His senior thesis focused on predictive modeling for commercial real estate valuation." Dad's expression showed complete bewilderment as he struggled to reconcile this information with 5 years of treating me as intellectually limited. "Patricia, how is this possible? Ricky never mentioned studying computer science." The next slide displayed corporate documentation showing Marcus Williams listed as managing director of Thompson Investment Group, along with his Goldman Sachs employment history and professional qualifications. Patricia's presentation methodically connected Marcus's role with his college roommate relationship with me, creating an undeniable pattern of collaboration and shared business interests. Furthermore, Patricia continued, Thompson Investment Group's registered address corresponds to a commercial building purchased by Ricky Thompson through a subsidiary corporation in March of 2021. The purchase price was $14.7 million paid entirely in cash. Jessica stood up abruptly, her voice rising with desperate denial. "That's impossible. Ricky doesn't have access to $14 million. He makes $35,000 annually as our operations coordinator." Patricia's response arrived with devastating precision. Thompson Investment Group's portfolio includes 67 commercial properties across Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin, with total assessed value exceeding $200 million. Financial records indicate consistent annual profits of 35 to 40% over the past 4 years. The silence that followed this revelation was broken only by the sound of Jessica collapsing back into her chair as the full magnitude of Patricia's discoveries began registering. Dad's face showed a progression of emotions from disbelief to recognition to profound regret as he realized the implications of having dismissed someone whose business achievements dwarfed his own company's success. The shell company structure was sophisticated enough to withstand routine investigation, Patricia explained, but certain patterns became obvious once I began looking specifically for connections between Thompson Investment Group and our family. The timing of corporate formations, the geographical focus of investments, and the strategic decision to provide financing for Project Horizon all point to deliberate coordination rather than coincidental business interest. She clicked to the next slide, which displayed a detailed analysis of Thomson Holdings' subcontractor relationships over the past 3 years. Highlighted entries showed 12 projects where my family's company had unknowingly provided construction services for properties owned by Thomson Investment Group, generating total revenues of $4.7 million. Jessica, the new business you've been taking credit for actually originated from your brother's strategic planning, Patricia announced with clinical precision. Thomson Holdings has been benefiting from Ricky's investments for years, while he received no recognition for generating those opportunities. Jessica's emotional breakdown was immediate and complete. Years of arrogance and dismissive treatment crumbled under the weight of evidence that her success had been built on my invisible foundation. Her sobbing acknowledgement of systematic mistreatment mixed with desperate pleas for forgiveness created a scene that was both heartbreaking and satisfying. "Ricky, I'm so sorry." She gasped through tears that seemed to wash away years of accumulated resentment. "I had no idea. I never understood. How could I have been so blind and cruel?" Dad's reaction was equally emotional, but more complex, combining pride in my achievements with crushing guilt about his failure to recognize my potential. His apology included acknowledgement of favoritism and bias that had shaped family dynamics for years. "Son, I failed you completely," he said, his voice breaking with genuine remorse. "I allowed preconceptions and prejudice to blind me to your capabilities and contributions. You built an empire while I treated you like an assistant." The most difficult part of Patricia's presentation involved documentation of Jessica's boyfriend Trevor's betrayal. Her investigation had uncovered evidence that Trevor had been secretly recording family business conversations and sharing confidential information with competitors who were preparing hostile takeover attempts during our financial crisis. Trevor wasn't interested in a relationship, Patricia explained gently but firmly. He was gathering intelligence about Thomson Holdings' operations and expansion plans. His sudden departure during your crisis was calculated to maximize psychological pressure, while his business associates prepared acquisition offers. Jessica's response to this final betrayal represented a crucial test of her character transformation. Rather than defending Trevor or making excuses for his behavior, she immediately focused on protecting family business interests and ensuring that his espionage attempts were reported to appropriate authorities. "We need to contact law enforcement immediately," she declared with restored determination. Trevor's recordings might contain privileged information that could compromise our competitive position. The afternoon concluded with a completely restructured family business agreement that reflected our new understanding of individual capabilities and contributions. I accepted the role of Chief Executive Officer, while Jessica became Chief Operations Officer responsible for project implementation under my strategic oversight. Dad retained his chairman position with ceremonial authority and advisory responsibilities. Patricia Walsh's promotion to Chief Operating Officer was unanimous, recognizing her analytical skills and investigative capabilities as essential for future business success. Her thorough uncovering of my secret empire had demonstrated exactly the kind of professional expertise our expanded operations would require. Marcus accepted our offer to join Thomson Holdings as Director of Strategic Partnerships, formalizing the collaboration that had generated our family's rescue and transformation. His Goldman Sachs experience combined with our regional market knowledge would create competitive advantages that established developers would struggle to match. The day ended with genuine family reconciliation that felt more meaningful than any business success. Jessica's sincere remorse and Dad's heartfelt acknowledgement of his mistakes created the foundation for relationships based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy and favoritism. As we sat together in Dad's living room sharing pizza and discussing plans for our transformed family business, I realized that the most valuable outcome wasn't financial or professional recognition, but the restoration of family bonds that had been damaged by years of misunderstanding and prejudice. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation that changed everything, Thomson Holdings celebrated its most successful quarter in company history during our annual stakeholder dinner at the Cedar Rapids Country Club. The numbers told a remarkable story of transformation. Revenues had increased by 112%, profit margins had improved to 18%, and our project pipeline extended 18 months into the future, with confirmed contracts exceeding $57 million. More importantly, the evening represented a celebration of family relationships rebuilt on foundations of mutual respect and honest communication. Jessica's introduction of me as the visionary leader who transformed our understanding of strategic thinking and business potential carried genuine warmth that would have seemed impossible during those dark days when our company faced potential bankruptcy. Dad's speech to the assembled guests included public acknowledgement of his mistakes in recognizing family members' capabilities and contributions. His admission that prejudice and assumption nearly cost us everything while humility and truth saved our legacy created a powerful moment of vulnerability that strengthened rather than diminished his authority as family patriarch. Trevor's attempted corporate espionage had resulted in federal charges for trade secret theft and violation of recording consent laws. His conviction and subsequent imprisonment had sent clear signals throughout the business community about the consequences of targeting Thomson Holdings with unethical competitive practices. More satisfying than his legal troubles was the complete destruction of his professional reputation, ensuring that his betrayal would follow him for the remainder of his career. The integration of Marcus into our family business operations had exceeded even my optimistic projections. His Goldman Sachs experience combined with our regional market expertise had created innovative financing structures that allowed Thomson Holdings to compete successfully for major development projects previously dominated by national corporations. Our unique hybrid model of construction expertise and investment sophistication was generating interest from clients across the Midwest. Patricia Walsh's transformation from suspicious financial officer to trusted strategic partner had been equally remarkable. Her investigative capabilities had proven invaluable during due diligence for new projects, while her analytical skills had identified cost-saving opportunities that contributed significantly to our improved profit margins. Her promotion to Chief Operating Officer reflected both professional competence and personal integrity that made her an ideal leadership team member. The most profound changes, however, were personal rather than professional. Jessica's journey from arrogant dismissiveness to genuine collaboration had been painful but authentic. Her willingness to acknowledge mistakes and learn from consequences had transformed our sibling relationship from competitive antagonism to supportive partnership. Our weekly strategy meetings had evolved into sessions of mutual respect and complementary expertise that made both of us more effective leaders. Dad's evolution had been equally significant. His recognition that successful business leadership required identifying and developing everyone's potential had replaced his previous pattern of favoritism and assumption. His commitment to inclusive decision-making and open communication had created a family business environment that attracted talented professionals who appreciated our collaborative culture. The broader business community had taken notice of Thomson Holdings' remarkable transformation. Regional business publications had featured our story as an example of family business renewal, while university business programs had requested case study information about our restructuring process. Speaking invitations from family business associations had provided opportunities to share lessons learned during our crisis and recovery. My personal satisfaction, however, came less from professional recognition than from the knowledge that my patient strategy had achieved its intended outcomes. The months of enduring dismissive treatment and public humiliation had been vindicated not through revenge but through education and transformation that strengthened rather than destroyed family relationships. The algorithm that had started everything continued generating investment opportunities that supported Thomson Holdings' expansion while building my personal portfolio toward the $300 million milestone. The irony that Jessica's dismissal of my little side jobs had unknowingly referenced activities generating more revenue than most Fortune 500 companies remained a private source of amusement. Our family dinners had resumed their weekly tradition with completely transformed dynamics. Conversations that had once featured Jessica's condescending lectures and Dad's dismissive comments had evolved into genuine exchanges of ideas and mutual consultation about business strategy. The respect I had always craved had finally been earned through demonstration rather than demanded through argument. The most meaningful moment of our transformation came during Thompson Holdings' 30th anniversary celebration, when Dad presented me with the original building plans from his first construction project. His inscription read, "To Ricky, whose vision exceeded mine and whose patience taught us all that success requires recognizing the potential in everyone around us." Jessica's gift was even more personal, a framed photograph of Thompson Investment Group's first property acquisition, along with a handwritten note apologizing for years of failing to see my capabilities and thanking me for using my success to save rather than abandon our family legacy. The life lesson that emerged from our experience extended far beyond family business dynamics. Success often requires strategic patience rather than immediate recognition, and the most profound victories come from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. My secret empire could have remained hidden forever, allowing me to enjoy private satisfaction while my family struggled with their own limitations. Instead, revealing the truth at the moment when it could teach rather than merely punish had created opportunities for growth and transformation that benefited everyone involved. The business world often celebrates aggressive competition and individual achievement at the expense of collaborative success and mutual support. Our family's journey demonstrated that sustainable success requires recognizing and developing the potential in everyone, rather than assuming that current performance indicates permanent limitations. Perhaps most importantly, the experience taught us that love and respect within families cannot be taken for granted or demanded through hierarchy. They must be earned through consistent demonstration of character and mutual care, even when that care is not immediately recognized or appreciated. As I looked around the country club dining room at our celebration, watching Jessica confidently present our quarterly results, while Dad beamed with genuine pride at both his children's achievements, I realized that the most valuable outcome wasn't the financial success or professional recognition. It was the knowledge that our family had learned to see each other clearly and value each other genuinely, creating a foundation for continued success that would last far beyond any individual business achievement. The journey from boardroom humiliation to family transformation had required patient strategy and ultimately forgiveness that was more powerful than revenge. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your opponents, but from helping them become better than they thought possible. I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by people who should have known your worth? How did you handle that situation, and what would you do differently if given another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below because your experiences might help someone else who's facing similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family dynamics and workplace challenges. Don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's recognition. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is simply proving them wrong while maintaining enough grace to help them grow from the experience. Until next time, keep believing in your own potential, even when others can't see it yet.